channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I'm going to film a whisper ramble story time, if you will. It's going to be a birth story, like a labor, delivery, maybe a little bit of pregnancy, about my second son's birth. I already did a video on my first son's birth, so I'll link that here. And these two stories are like the complete opposite of each other, in my opinion. My first son was born in a hospital. I got an epidural that failed, I think. Had a really rough recovery. So this one is a lot different. I switched to midwife care instead of obstetrics and OBGYN, and I delivered at a birthing center without an epidural. I did. Anyways, I'll get into all the details, but anyways, so it's like totally different stories. One's a hospital birth and one's a birthing center birth. So I'll get into all the details, but very TMI, lots of woman stuff. If there's anything that I talk about that you're confused about, or if you have any questions, like, feel free to put them in the comments. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and I realize that, like, there's a lot of terms I might use that I think are normal, but it's like they're not, because it's just only relating to birth. So if there's stuff like that you're like, what the heck does that mean, just let me know and I can answer in more detail in the comments. But I'll try to keep it like straightforward. Like, I'll try to keep it making sense, but I don't know like what you know or don't know or whatever. So again, like, lots of whispered rambling. I'll throw in some tongue clicking, some cupped whispers, some finger flutters. It'll probably be long. My last one was really long. Story time was really long. I feel like I remember the details of this birth a little less, but I also just think we tracked a lot of it less. Like, I don't know, for some reason, like, my first delivery just like stands out so much. In my second one, I remember everything, but like the really nitty-gritty details I don't remember as well, I feel like. So I do have my computer up, and I'm in like the portal of the birthing center, and I might reference some of their notes occasionally to like try and date things and try to figure out what all I did, because the last week of pregnancy was very long, and like I was in every day, and it was an ordeal. But anyways, so if bodily stuff freaks you out, this is not the video for you, but hopefully this will just lull you to sleep. Okay, so this was inspired by Explore in ASMR, and she did her birth story, and I liked the way that she like formatted her video. She told you about how she found out, a little bit about her pregnancy, and then her labor and delivery story. So in terms of finding out this about this pregnancy, so with my first son, I talked about how like he wasn't fully planned. Like we knew we were able to get pregnant, but we weren't, like, I wasn't like charting and like mapping out ovulation and all that jazz. This was different. We were planning, like, trying to get pregnant. When we knew we wanted our kids, our goal, if we could choose, was to have our kids 2 years apart. So that would mean we would start trying at around when my first son was like 14 months, or even earlier. So like we were open to it. However, one thing I didn't expect is that I didn't get my period back for a very long time after my first. When you breastfeed, especially, I think the difference with me is that we co-slept and he breastfed on demand at night, and like he was in daycare. Like, I was in work full time, not pumping, and he only nursed nights and weekends, and that was still enough to like keep my period away, and like I couldn't get pregnant, essentially. You can get pregnant while breastfeeding. I am just like a more sensitive case, I guess. I also just think they don't have as many studies on people in my situation, just because not a lot of people are in it. Like, not a lot of people breastfeed past the first year, let alone breastfeed like while co-sleeping, and so it's just such a tiny portion of like statistics that they don't really know that much. But when I was in that situation, I did do a ton of research and found that it is actually somewhat common, if you're in my situation, to not be able to get pregnant. It's just like no one's in that situation. Not no one, but there's not a lot of people who, you know, at 2 years old are co-sleeping and they're nursing still every 2 nights, 2 months, or 2 hours at night, excuse me. So I basically was infertile, kind of, because I was nursing. So we were open to getting pregnant. We were doing nothing preventative. We were hoping it would happen for like, I want to say we started acting that way in May. Oh, so then he was like 14. He was like a little older. He was like 16 months. Is that right? Whatever it was, like I started not preventing. I can't, I'm filming on my phone and I have like all of this logged in my phone. But anyways, so basically for about 6 months I had no period, but we were not preventing and we were hoping to get pregnant. And I took tests every month, hoping, not every month, I took tests like 15 days after every time we had sex, like hoping like it would be positive, and it wasn't. And it was disappointing because I really wanted to have a second child and I wanted them to be close in age. So our goal, we were like, okay, we want them to be 2 to 3 years apart, like a whole year. If the next baby could be born sometime between 2 to 3 years after the first, that would be like our ideal. And so finally in September, so my son was born January 2017. Then in, a year later, we started, hoping to get pregnant, and it wasn't happening. So finally, when he was about 20 months, it was September, I think that's 20 months. Yeah. When he was 20 months, I did get pregnant, we just caught the first time I ovulated, we think, and I got pregnant from that. With that pregnancy, so that was September 2018. So with that pregnancy, right off the bat, my gut was off. Like there was something really off that I felt, and I had a lot of cramping. I had bleeding, which can be normal. I never bled or spotted or anything with my first, so this was different for me. But they were like, well, you can bleed in pregnancy. It's just like whatever. So I had my first appointment, and then I said, yeah, I do have cramping and bleeding. Like, is that concerning? And they were like, I mean, it could be normal, but it could be concerning. So let's get you an ultrasound. This was with OBs, by the way. Nowadays they just get you blood tested, and they can tell. I don't know why they sent me in for an ultrasound right away. So they sent me in for an ultrasound. This is gonna be such a long story. They sent me in for an ultrasound, and they couldn't find anything. They were like, there is literally, you should be 7 weeks. There's absolutely no trace of a baby. And so we just thought, oh, like it was really sad. So we thought, okay, I miscarried just really early, like at 4, immediately, which was very sad. Like, you get so excited, and like to me, like a loss is a loss no matter how small. Would I have rather had that loss at 4 weeks than later? Absolutely. And it is a different level of sadness, but nonetheless, it's really sad when you're wanting to get pregnant, you're wanting the baby, the due date, you're thinking about announcements, you're naming it, it's your baby. So that was really sad. So they said, so let's just do some blood tests to make sure and rule out that it's not ectopic. An ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy where the the sperm, the egg, whatever, it implants outside of your uterus. So like, you can't move. Once an egg is implanted in your body, you can't move it. So if it doesn't make it to the uterus, uterus, there's no chance of survival. Like, they have not been able to figure out how to move it, like, into the uterus, which then would let it survive. But they did. During the ultrasound, I mean, she checked everywhere. She could not find anything. And so she's like, okay, well, like, that, you probably just had a normal miscarriage. So we took my blood levels, my blood tests, and I would go take blood tests every other day. And the HCG, which is what indicates you're pregnant, would not go down. So they were like, that's very concerning, because it should be going down if it's a miscarriage. So they just kept monitoring it, and finally one of the tests, it went up. Because what they do with miscarriage is they take your blood test every other day until it hits 0. So eventually it was going down super slow, and eventually it did go up. And so they immediately, like, they wouldn't let me leave. They were like, this is an emergency. You have to go get an ultrasound, like, right, or no, how did it work? They called me and said, hey, your levels went up. You need to come in for an ultrasound, like, right now. Like, we will book you. Get in here in half an hour. You need to come right now. And it was a little awkward because I was supposed to leave, like, in an hour for a work trip. And I was at work, and they called me, and they're like, you need to come in this second. And so I had to tell my boss, like, hey, like, you paid for that flight. I can't go right now. I have to go get an ultrasound. And it's urgent. Like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, I'm having a medical emergency. Because, like, obviously he didn't know I was pregnant. Obviously he didn't know I miscarried. I just, like, was supposed to go on this work trip, and all of a sudden I'm like, I can't go this second, but hopefully I can, if everything's fine, I can come back. I can, like, make a later flight. So it was awkward because, like, this whole day I'm, like, keeping my coworkers updated, like, if I can go on the trip or not. So I canceled, I guess, that flight that I was supposed to make and went for the ultrasound. In the ultrasound, they looked everywhere, and they did find the egg implanted in my fallopian tube, which you can just Google that if you don't know what that is. It's just like, it was not inside the right place. So basically, the thing is with that situation, you need to, like, if it's not really a baby, but, like, if the egg were to try to keep growing, it could cause, like, major internal bleeding, and, like, you could lose your fallopian tube, which means you could, like, not be able to get pregnant, and technically you could, like, die. They were very, very serious about it. They, like, when they found it in my fallopian tube, that's when they were like, you're not allowed to leave. I mean, like, I probably could have signed waivers to leave, but they were like, we are escorting you to the hospital, to the ER, to get this taken care of, because this is a very dangerous, and, like, yeah, their whole spiel, like, you could die, we need to take care of it, blah, blah, blah. And the lady was so annoyed with me, because I was, like, not fully understanding, like, the gravity of it. I was like, so I can't travel today, and she's like, no, tell them you're not going this weekend, like, your flight's canceled, like, this is an emergency, like, you're not going anywhere for a few days, like, you should be, like, on bed rest for a few days after this. Anyways, so they literally walked me over to the emergency room, because I think they were worried I would leave, like, because I was, like, acting kind of really chill. I was honestly just kind of in shock of, like, what was going on. I was, like, very confused, and, like, I had already kind of mourned the loss of the pregnancy, and wasn't really prepared for this. Anyways, so they took me to the ER, and they said, we can do surgery on you right now to remove it, or we can give you medication to remove it. And they said, it's small enough, we think a medication would work, but we'll do a dose of medication. If it doesn't work, we'll ask you to go in for surgery. So I took the medication, and I was home that night, and I don't know, it's just weird situations like that, like, no one really knows. I think it's rare enough that, like, they don't really know as much about it, and especially, like, I was still breastfeeding, so I was like, well, with this medication, can I still breastfeed? Does it go through my milk? And they just like Google searched it and gave me the first answer. I was like, okay, well, I could have done that. Eventually, after a lot of digging and talking to people, I found out like the information I needed. But it's like one of the situations where like you're the only person that can find the information you need, because they just like don't have the time of day to figure it out. And I don't know, it's just like adds on top of the stress of the situation of like no one knowing actually what's going on. Anyways, so then they monitored my blood and made sure the levels went down to 0, and it did. So like that situation resolved itself. And I mean, through that whole process, I had like 16 blood draws within 2 weeks. They couldn't draw from when you get your blood drawn, it's here. And they had taken so many blood draws from both of my arms that they were bruised enough that they couldn't take blood anymore. They just started taking them from my hands. It was a mildly traumatic experience. I was just like totally beat up from all the blood draws. But it resolved. I didn't need surgery. Anyways, so that was really sad. And then again, based on my own research, the drug that I took, you should not get pregnant for like 3 months after, because there's just risks to your to the new pregnancy. So I asked my doctor, or one of my doctors, I said, hey, when can we start trying again? And she's like, oh, right away, you're fine. I'm like, oh, okay, because like what I read online said like it could cause deformities or issues, and she's like, nope, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. So we started trying, and then I get an email after we start trying, hey, I'm so sorry, I was wrong, please do not try to get pregnant for another 3 months. And I was like, I literally asked you 3 times, and you're like, oh, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, like you didn't even look it up. Like that was for another thing where it was like, again, you really are your best advocate. Like you can't rely on a stranger to know everything about you and what's best for you. Anyways, so that was just, it was really, this all happened in November. So it was just really sad. We went through the holidays just having that loss. And it was like a rough holidays. It was just sad. But anyways, and then we had to wait to get pregnant, and at that point I had put so much pressure on myself to have my first 2 kids close together. I don't know why. And you know, sometimes you just can't stop yourself from stressing out, like as easy as it is to say, oh, like in God's timing, or you know, what's meant to be will happen. Like you just I don't know, I personally don't like to hear that when I went through what I went through. You can only really just sympathize and like be like, yeah, that sucks. But like if you get it stuck in your head that you want, I don't know, it's just like, I didn't realize the pressure of like when you want to get pregnant, trying to get pregnant is extremely stressful, and you just put all this pressure on yourself, and it's like your body's the only thing that can do it. And but I was really frustrated that we had to wait 3 months, because I was like, we're already getting to the end of the timeline of when I wanted to get pregnant, and now we have to wait longer. And I was just very cranky about it, I guess. So after we waited through that period, then we started trying to get pregnant. At that point, I had gotten my period back, and I was actually like charting. So I was taking ovulation tests twice a day, mapping it out, and I did this for about 3 months. And then the more I researched because I still was breastfeeding, the more I researched breastfeeding and fertility, I found that it's possible that breastfeeding could cause you to not get pregnant based on, I could get all into it, you probably don't want to know. Basically, the luteal phase of your cycle is too short, it's not enough time to implant, etc. So we decided to wean my son. So this was when he was like 26 months, so he was like 2 in a few months. We decided to go ahead and wean him, and it went well. It was like the right timing. I had kind of half tried before, but we weren't ready, and this time we were ready. And the next month I got pregnant. So I don't know if it was a coincidence, or if for that situation I could not get pregnant while nursing, but I did get pregnant while nursing. It just was an ectopic, so I don't know. So I I did get pregnant. We were ecstatic. Well, no, let me back up. So I found out I got pregnant, and I was like, and it was May. It was like mid-May, and I was thinking like, if I can just keep my mouth shut, and I can't. There's no way I could ever do this, but I wanted to try. I was like, I could sell my husband for Father's Day, or like give him an early Father's Day gift, and tell him I was pregnant. So I did not tell him for a few days. That's so weird. Both these pregnancies, I waited a few days. Anyways. So I waited a few days, but because of my history of ectopic, and I think they also usually do this if you have a history of miscarriage, the second I called, they were like, go in today for blood work. And I asked, again, another situation where I had looked it up and I saw if you go in too early for blood work, it can be volatile and it's not as useful. And so I told her, I said, I'm only, like, I haven't even had my missed period yet. Like, that's how early I am. Will this mess up the results? And she's like, no, I don't think so. Go in. So I go in. Obviously, it's low. Then I go in 2 days later, and it drops. So I get a call at work, and they go, hey, your blood levels dropped. So at this point, we're just monitoring for ectopic, implying that you miscarried. They're like, okay, so, the levels dropped. That's not good. We're just gonna make sure it goes down back to 0. So, like, very casually being like, you miscarried. And I was like, I was so upset. So I called, I was at work, I stepped outside, and so I called my husband, hysterically crying, like, it happened again, I lost another one, like, and he's just like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I had a positive pregnancy test a few days ago. I went and got 2 blood tests, and they said it dropped, and that it's gone, and now I have to, like, go through this all again of monitoring the blood loss, like, back down. Meanwhile, I knew that testing so early could be volatile, but I assumed, since I asked them, they also knew this. So they just were like, okay, yeah, it's like it went down. Well, it turns out it only went down 1 point, which is like nothing. So then I got another test, and it tripled, which is good. And then I was upset because I was like, they're gonna think it's ectopic. They're gonna make me go, and I went to, like, worst case scenario. It's just, my head went all over the place. Anyways, but the nurse who called me was like, hey, it went up. That's pretty good. We're gonna do a few more tests to make sure it gets into this certain range before we have an ultrasound. And so I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, it's just so weird how the first nurse was just like, you miscarried, and then the second nurse was like, oh yeah, it went up, whatever. I'm like, what did the second nurse, I don't know. Anyways, so I was like, oh my god, like, maybe it is viable. So we wait a few weeks, or not a few weeks, a few more days, and it goes up high enough. So then we go get an ultrasound, which should be 6 weeks. In the ultrasound, they can see everything properly, but they can't see enough to deem it viable, because it was like measuring at 5 weeks, and I should have been at 6. So then I was like, okay, is it just earlier than I thought? Is it not viable, and it's like it stopped growing at 5 weeks? Or, and I asked them this, I said, in my last pregnancy, they mentioned I had a slight tilt in my uterus. Could that impact it? And they're like, I guess, yeah, maybe. Well, it's like the first thing you Google, that a tilted uterus affects ultrasound. So I don't know why they were like, yeah, maybe. They were not, like, negative, though. They were like, oh, like, it just could be too early. Like, this doesn't mean anything at all. Let's just have you come back in a few weeks. No big deal. So then we had to wait a few weeks of, like, not knowing whether it was viable or not. And then when we went back, it was measuring exactly what I expected it to. So I think there was something about my very slight uterus tilt that just made it look younger, which is what, like, Google says. Like, I knew that, like, it could cause it, like, that tilt could cause it to look younger than it is, which is exactly what happened. So then they couldn't confirm viability because, like, the angle. So then they confirmed viability at, like, So then we did a sneak peek early test, which just means you can test, so you can actually find out the baby's sex as early as 7 weeks. Like their DNA has it in like has the chromosomes or whatever in it. So we did a sneak peek test and we found out at 9 weeks it was a boy. And then overall that pregnancy was easier than my first, which was already kind of easy. Until about halfway, and then I did have some symptoms of like prenatal depression, which I have some recent videos where I talk about that, and that I have experienced that with all 3 of my pregnancies, and with each one it's kind of gotten worse. But I did have some prenatal depression with that. So my first, well, I mentioned with my first pregnancy, I had an epidural, but it failed, I think. So I gave birth like in excruciating pain. So based on that experience, I thought, you know what, that was pretty miserable. It can't get worse than that, right? Like if I tried without it. So my sister-in-law had mentioned like birthing centers. I didn't know birthing centers were a thing. I thought it was either like a hospital or a home birth, and I wasn't comfortable with a home birth. But I didn't love my hospital experience. And then when I found out like what a birthing center was, it's like in the middle. So it's basically, it's like very holistic. Like you're not hooked up to machines. You most often can give birth in a tub, like you do water birth. You use midwives instead of doctors. But they have rooms and they look like bedrooms with like a big tub, and you give birth in those rooms. So instead of being at home, you're in a facility that you have nurses who check you periodically. They have some emergency equipment. It's more than just you and your midwife in your home. You like have a midwife and a nurse, and so it's like I said, it's like a really good in-between option of hospital or home birth. It's like in between. It's like you still have some medical equipment and extra people, but you also are not like in the cold, stark like hospital environment, which can reverse your labor sometimes. And you're not required to be hooked up to monitoring constantly, which I do think can increase unnecessary intervention sometimes. And like you don't have the choice of an epidural and some things like that I was going to opt out of anyways. So halfway through the pregnancy, about a little before halfway, I switched from doctors to midwives. So I started going to a midwife center, and it's just like the OB center or the OB office where there were like 10 midwives, and you saw a different midwife each time, and then whoever was on call when you went into labor is the person who gave birth. So it's not like I had one specific person. It was like there was a whole rotation of people, and someone's always on call, which I was fine with. I didn't feel the need for like one very specific person that I knew. I thought they were all great. So at the midwife center, it was cool. It was a very different experience than at the hospital, or not the hospital, at the OB. So the OB, like you go in, they focus a lot on your stats. I don't know, I felt like a number. It was just like, and it felt like every answer was like a one-size-fit-all answer. And whereas when you talk to the midwives, they're like, okay, well, what is your history? How do you feel? Like, do you feel like that's like, a lot of it is like, trust your gut, do research yourself, like be your own advocate. Like it's a lot of like responsibility on the client to be paying attention to yourself and to be healthy and to be making smart choices, and less like, oh, just take this medication if you have heartburn, or just do this if you have this, or you're gaining too much weight, so focus on this, or I mean, those can be good things too, but I don't know, it was just so, like, I felt like it felt like every appointment was like a therapy session. Like, they just really took time to like, how do you feel about this? You mentioned this last time. Do you feel better about that now? Do you want to talk about it? And then same with like depression screening. They did that at my initial appointment which at the time I felt fine, but I'm glad they said something. Eventually, I didn't feel fine, and I mentioned it, and they said, well, we have an in-house psychologist, and they basically, like, really pushed me to go talk to her, and I'm so glad they did, because it's hard to get help sometimes when you're feeling down. It's hard to, like, because you also question, sometimes you're like, am I being dramatic, am I, you know, and they're like, just go talk, like, it's the best thing for you, like, just try it, you only have to go once, like, so I did. I didn't feel like it really helped me, that sounds dumb, but I basically just cried and talked the whole time, but anyways. So the end of that pregnancy was a little rougher in terms of my mental health, but I got through it. Anyways, holy cow, I'm talking so long. Oh well, hopefully this is a good ramble, or like you're asleep already. So, let's see, towards the end of my pregnancy, so my first son was born 3 days early, and everyone said typically you start to go, like, typically you have your kids earlier and earlier, so I was mentally prepared to go into labor in, like, at, like, 38 or 39 weeks, and, like, a full term, or, like, the end is 40, and then you can go up to 42 before the state gets involved, and they, like, force you to have the baby. So basically, at the birthing center, if you go into labor too soon, that's high risk, so you have to go to the hospital, and if you give birth too late, they make you go to the hospital because that's also high risk. So basically, I knew that I had to give birth before 42 weeks, or I would not be allowed to give birth at the birthing center. I'd have to go give birth at the hospital. I didn't think I would make it that far. So the last few weeks leading up to birth, I had what I think is prodromal labor, and it just means your body starts labor a few weeks early. It's really slow and gradual, and it, like, just a ton of Braxton eggs, like, they kind of hurt a little bit, but not too much. Like, I was still able to go to work and work. Sometimes they'd hurt, sometimes they wouldn't. They'd come and go. But I would get my hopes up. I'd be like, oh, maybe, like, maybe by tomorrow I'll have the baby, and, like, nothing would happen. So now I'm gonna start looking at my encounter notes, like my appointment notes, because this is where I'm gonna mix stuff up with dates. Again, this is just, like, I think part of why I switched from OB to midwife. It really felt like every step of the way the midwives knew what they were talking about, but in the most humble way. Like, they would say, like, well, you know, this is very typical, but if you really feel like something's wrong, like, you have to trust your gut, and, like, we could be wrong, and, like, they were so humble, but they were almost always right. And whenever anything like that happened with the OBs, they would give me, like, a really canned response, one size fits all. I don't know if it's, like, a liability thing, but it was like they were rarely helpful and caused more harm than good for me in my specific situations. So, for example, the baby, there's an ideal position for the baby, and they can kind of rotate, which is fine. It's just painful. And I had those pains with my first, and no one once mentioned, oh, your baby's just rotated. Well, and then when I was with the midwives, I was like, yeah, I'm having this pain, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, well, that's because he's rotated. I can tell right now. And I'm like, why didn't the OBs know that? Or if they did, why did they ignore it? And, like, let me suffer when it was as simple as, she was like, literally, it was as simple as doing a few downward dogs, like, a few yoga positions, and then the pain went away. I'm like, why did no one I see with my first son say that, if it's that simple? Like, I was just very frustrated, all the things that I learned with my midwives that I could have had they could have just told me that with my first, and no one told me. And I'm like, do they just not care? Are they really that ill-informed? Like, do they really not know that much? It's just, like, it left me wondering so much, like, why did my first, like, pregnancy and birth go the way it did, when some of these things seemed so obvious to the midwives? They're like, oh yeah, like, just do this, bam, done, and fixed it. So that happened at my 38-week appointment. Baby's, you, turned around. This is what we told her to do. Then, at 39 weeks, so at 39 weeks, so I went in for an appointment about the same time I gave birth to my first son, so I was thinking like, okay, it should be any day now, right? They don't check your cervix for dilation until you hit your due date. That's just like a philosophy that most midwives stand by, that checking for dilation doesn't actually help. It doesn't determine when you're going to give labor. For me, that's kind of true. Well, that's kind of true for everyone. Some people are 4 centimeters for weeks. Some people, like me, do not open up until like it's go time. So I'm kind of glad they didn't, because it is discouraging. So then I went in for an appointment at 40 weeks and 3 days. So I was 3 days past my due date, and at that point I was like starting to feel discouraged. And honestly, my advice, if you have like a friend or family member who's going past their due date, like, don't ask them if they've had their baby yet. They'll tell you. It was like every morning I woke up to a slew of texts from people. Did you have and I'd have to answer like literally every morning, no, I didn't have the baby yet. Thanks for the reminder. Like, no, I'm in a lot of pain, but thanks. And then every day at work too, like I had to, because I planned to work up until I went into labor, and so every day at work I had to end the day with everything ready to go to take off 12 weeks and like pack up everything, and like every single night it was such like a mind fuck to go past my due date when I really did not expect it, and made me very sad. So at this appointment they did a membrane sweep. Let's see. So it says they have all my stats. Oh, they didn't do membrane sweep. So I wanted a membrane sweep. So that just means they basically just like scratch the top of your cervix, I think, to just kind of like agitate it and get it going, in case, you know, it's just like a little tickle, see if you sneeze, just a little tickle, see if it starts anything. They couldn't, because I was completely closed. They couldn't even access the point to do a membrane sweep, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm past my due date, and you're saying I have 0. Like, I was 0 centimeters. Like, I was fully closed. And they're like, we're sorry. We can't do a membrane sweep today, but come back next week. So, physical exam, couldn't do the membrane sweep. So then they schedule me an appointment at 41 weeks. So if you go to 41 weeks, if you go a whole week past your due date, they make you get like an ultrasound. They check the cervical or the amniotic fluid. They do a stress test to make sure the baby's safe, because there are risks with delivering late. Like, you know, it's risky to deliver early and late. So when you hit 41 weeks, they like check like everything. And that's when I told my boss, I said, hey, I'm going in for like a 3-hour appointment today, and then I'm probably going to be like, I'm going to be literally doing everything I can to have this baby, because I don't want a hospital birth, so I have to have the baby this week. So I just started my maternity leave at 41 weeks instead of waiting to go into labor, because I was literally at the birthing center every day doing stuff to go into labor. Between 40 weeks and 41 weeks, we were having like sex, obviously, like that can induce labor. We were having sex. I was doing all sorts of walking. I was eating spicy foods. Like, I was doing everything I could at home. They asked me not to breast pump at home. They wanted me to monitor. They didn't want me to do anything, especially since it wasn't my first. They didn't want me to do anything too invasive without their supervision, just for safety reasons. So typically you can do pumping, like breast pumping, nipple stimulation can cause labor. So basically all we really could do was just like, I did a lot of walking. I did some like yoga to induce labor videos, stretches, sex, a bunch of stuff. So then finally at 41 weeks, I got like a ultrasound, they did all these testing, stress tests. He was fine. They were just like, he's just comfy. So that was exactly at 41 weeks. So, at 41 weeks, cancer. Okay. I think they gave me, at that appointment, I think they gave me castor oil to take home. Because I asked for it, I decided to, yep, so, at 41 weeks, I took castor oil. I only took half of the bottle because, so castor oil, like, makes you just, like, shit your brains out, basically. So I only took half of it, and I didn't shit my brains out. But I, through the night, felt like I was in labor. I was like, okay, good, this is working, I'm in labor. And then I woke up, and I was not in labor. So what happened was, I think it definitely helped him, like, get lower. I think it made him move down. So then 2 days later, so then the next day, I went to the mall and, like, walked miles. I walked so much. And we went to the park. I did curb walking. We were still having sex. I mean, like, I'm telling you, everything at home we could do. The only thing I didn't do was eat dates. Nothing worked. Like, I would walk, have contractions. The second I stopped walking, they'd go away. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, we tried everything. So then 2 days later, they said, okay, why don't you come in? Let's try some more stuff. So I came in. They did a membrane sweep successfully, because at that point I was at like 1 centimeter. They did a membrane sweep, and then they said, okay, let's do a catheter, a Cook's catheter, also known as a Foley bulb. So, and they were sure this would work. They were like, you're gonna come, like, we'll see you in a few hours. So usually they do this in a hospital to induce, and like, you don't leave with it. And I had people, so I posted about it on Instagram, like, just my personal page, and I got a few replies like, oh, they did that with me, but they let you leave with it. Like, what the heck? So basically, a Foley bulb is this, like, little balloon, and they stick it up your vagina. I don't know if that's a flag word. And they put water in it, or saline or something, and make it expand. And so then you have this, like, think of like a little water balloon up in you. And they were like, alright, see you later. Call us when it falls out. Because the idea is that it puts pressure on your cervix and makes you open and dilate. And so if you hit 3 to 4 centimeters, then it will fall out. And that's, like, should induce labor, right? Because it gets you to like 4 centimeters, so then you should probably be going into labor soon. So they were like, see you later, and they were joking. They're like, we'll see you in a few hours, because this will probably work like it usually works, and it's your second, and you know. So I leave the appointment, and I'm like laughing, because like no one's ever walking around with this. I go grocery shopping, like, with this Foley bulb in. I'm like thinking I'm so funny, like, haha. So later that night, and it did induce contractions. I had a bunch of contractions. Again, every day I would have contractions, to the point where I was like, I think this is labor. And then they would go away. And I'm like, it was so frustrating. And still getting texts from everybody all the time. Like, did you have the baby yet? Did you have the baby yet? So later that night, I remember it was like dinner time. It came out. And it came out with my mucus plug. So if you want to know what that is, that's just like a plug between the baby and your cervix. So that's like another step towards labor, is like the mucus plug coming out. So I took the Foley bulb out, and came right out, and with the mucus plug. So I was like, okay, it has to be tonight. Nothing. At the point that my mucus plug came out, I think at that point they said, don't have sex anymore, because we don't want to like risk like anything. I'm pretty sure they said at that point, don't have sex. So that night, went to bed, never went into labor. So frustrating. So then the next morning, they're like, okay, well, because the Foley bulb fell out, like, you have to be, you've got to be 4 centimeters by now, like, come in, and kind of implied, like, you're gonna have a baby today, like, we're gonna make it happen, so come in, get your stuff in order. So I went in the next morning. So this is the day that I had my baby, so I'm trying to remember. They don't have a ton of information, so I'm gonna try to remember as best as I can, especially the times, like the timelines. Like, when did they break my water? They don't say. See, none of this is like recorded. So I went back in. So this was 41 weeks and 3 days. So this is 10 days after my due date. So I get in there and they're like, okay, so I go by myself because I don't know how long this is gonna take. But I texted my husband and I said, they're kind of implying that we'll be able to make it happen today, but we don't know for sure. So the first thing they did was they were like, okay, we're gonna do a rotation. So you're going to do breast pump for half an hour, and then you're gonna do physical exercise for half hour. You can stay in the room and do lunges. You can go walk around. You can leave and go walk the sidewalks. Whatever it is, like, we want you to be moving for 30 minutes straight and don't stop. So I did that. I did like 3 rounds of that. So I would pump, I'd go take a walk, I'd come back, I'd pump, and it took like 3 hours, this whole rotation series. So by then, I think I asked my husband to come. So I think he was there for like my last round of pumping. So he was able to go for like a few hours of work, and then he told them like, hey, they're trying to induce, like, I'd like to go there to support her and hopefully she has the baby today. But again, there was no guarantee, but it was like, I should, like, we've done literally everything. So then after they did the pumping, I definitely was getting, like, my contractions started up and didn't stop, which was good, because prior to then, I would have contractions for like an hour and then they'd stop. So at this point, I was having like 3 hours of contractions, which were good. And so then they offered, I think they checked me, I was still only like 4 centimeters. So then I took more castor oil. So I took castor oil. Again, I told them what I had done initially, and I said I think that was really smart. I just did like a half a bottle. I think they gave me like 3/4 of the bottle. And that really kicked things into gear as well. So, and I don't know if they even counted, I don't think they even counted any of this as labor yet. Like, they didn't really count it as labor because they're like, it could stop, so it's not labor yet. So I took the castor oil. I did empty myself a lot. Like, actually, I was like starting to regret, because I was starting to get intense contractions, but I was on the toilet because of taking the castor oil. And then I was like, what if I like have the baby on the toilet, which is okay as long as someone's there to help. And they said people do it. I mean, that the toilet's like one of the most comfortable positions when you're in labor. But I was just like, oh, I wanted a water birth. I was not set on it, but I was like, kept picturing it, and I was like, I want to get into the bathtub for pain relief because I thought it would work. Anyways, so I eventually felt better. The castor oil cleared through my system, and then I think around 1 p.m., so I'd gotten there 11, 12, 1, oh. Maybe, I think I must have taken castor oil while I was doing the pumping rotations. They were like ready to throw, they're like, we'll throw everything at you, like, we'll do everything. Baby's gonna come out. So I got there at like 10 a.m. and did like 3 hours of like the pumping and the castor oil and stuff, and then finally my husband got there at like 12ish probably. And then I think at like 1 o'clock they broke my water manually. So they were like, okay, well, are you ready to commit to this? You're already 4 centimeters, we have high hopes. And I was nervous because I was thinking, if the baby doesn't want to come out, I don't want to end up with an emergency C-section, because I think sometimes if you try too much too soon and the baby just, if the baby doesn't want to, the baby's not gonna, and then you end up in a C-section. And so I was really nervous I'd end up getting transferred, but I don't know what that button is. Okay, sorry, something weird's popping up on my phone. But I was like, no, like I talked to them about that fear, and they're like, we really think you're ready, like it's just, he just needs a little bit of aid. So they broke my water around like 1. So I think that's when they considered labor starting, was at like 1 p.m. So all in all, they said my labor was like 7 hours. But like prodromal labor was weeks. And it's just so weird. Like I said, like I would feel in labor for hours and then it would go away. So at 1 o'clock, I texted my mom and I was like, hey, they're breaking my water. So like, I don't want you to come yet, but like you can come soon. So like slowly start to get ready to come, but don't rush over because I'm just kind of enjoying this time alone with Shane, my husband, you know, going through labor. So then during labor, we just tried all sorts of like tactics for pain management. Since it was the first time I've ever dealt with it, I didn't do anything to help myself with my first. So we were just trying all the things that like the labor class told you to, the positions and the pressure points and stuff. So I know now, that's why I'm kind of excited to go through it again, because I'm like, I know what worked last time, and so I want to go right into it knowing what to do and seeing like how well I can manage. So the best thing for me before it got too intense was I would get on all fours, like tabletop, and my husband would just put pressure on my back, my lower back, and that really helped relieve the pain. The midwives also put me into like certain positions to help expedite the labor, and I do think that worked. I went in, pain management was in the shower, so I remember like I leaned against I should actually insert a picture. It's not graphic, I don't think. So I was in the shower with the water on my back, leaning on a yoga ball, and that for pain management worked so well that I was worried it stopped my labor. I was like, my contractions are gone, like, but it was just, that's how effective like hot water is for pain management. Eventually I got into the tub for pain management, and so that was really helpful. So I labored for about, right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 30, and he was born at like 8:40, yeah. So I labored for like 6.5 hours, just like, now I feel like I have my like time off. No, that sounds right. It didn't seem it went faster than that. So I finally got into the tub for the last few hours, and that was really helpful for pain management. And so eventually I got really close to, once I started getting closer to transitional labor, which is like basically the end, where the baby tunnels straight down, and it's the most painful. I asked for nitrous oxide, so that is a drug that you inhale through a mask, and it's very quick. So when you inhale it, you get immediate relief, and it only lasts for like 30 seconds. So you time it to take a huff. You take a huff as you're having a contraction, and it just takes the edge of the contraction off that much to make it was like perfect. It was like you still felt the pain of the contraction, but it took that edge off to make it like, you could get through it. And it was perfect. It was like the tub and the nitrous oxide were like the perfect combo for me, where I still felt everything. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still painful, but it was just manageable. That it was a really neat experience to like feel it all, but I could handle it. I didn't think I was gonna die. So eventually, I started using that early because I was so scared of the pain of transitional labor because of what I went through with my first, like wanting to die. And so I was like, okay, I want to have the nitrous oxide ready to go. I don't want it to get to that point, and it never got to that point. Eventually, so I was in the tub when I ground. So his head came out. And again, it was honestly, like, this sounds dumb, but it was like a beautiful experience. Like, I was in the tub and they were very hands off, honestly. Like, they were all standing back, like no one was up and on me. Like, the midwife was there, and there was like a midwife in training, and she did almost everything. And the midwife was just like, trust yourself right now. Your body knows what to do. Listen to it. If you feel like you need to push, go ahead. If you feel like you need to wait, wait. Your body knows exactly what to do, and you need to trust it right now. Like, now's the time to work with your body and trust your instinct and do what you need to do. And it was like, it was just a serene, like the best pep talk ever. And like, okay, like, just giving me all the confidence. And it was like beautiful, kind of painful, very painful, but like, wow, like, what an experience. So I do have to say, I mean, when you give birth, there's this thing called the ring of fire. And it just feels like you feel like you're tearing, but I wasn't. It was just, the sensation was really, that was my least favorite part. That's the most painful part, and I wish I could get by without that, but I think that's inevitable. That feeling is like when the head is coming out. So if you're loving this TMI, we're getting really detailed. So I could feel, what's crazy is, like, I pushed his head out and then I couldn't sustain it, and he went back in. Isn't that crazy? Like, I could feel it all. It was so wild. And then I remember pushing him out and feeling him, like, wiggling. And I remember saying in between contractions, like, oh my god, I can feel him wiggling. That is crazy. It was like the most surreal feeling ever. I was like, oh my god, this is so weird. Like, I could feel him, like, wiggling in my vagina. It was so strange, but it was really cool to be able to feel it all. Like to know, like, I knew exactly what was going on. It was so strange, but so cool. So eventually his head came out, but his shoulder kind of got stuck. And so then they went into, like, not panic, but they went into, like, emergency mode. So and I have to say, the way that midwife handled it so perfectly. She knew, because the head was out, so she knew, like, okay, we need to get him out now. But his head was stuck, and she couldn't get him, the angle I was in the tub, she couldn't reach. And so she's like, there's no way I can get him out like this, and he's stuck. So and I was honestly out of it, and I don't know if, because it is such an intense physical experience that, like, you do kind of are out of it. Like, I don't know if it's that, or because the nitrous oxide is a drug, like, if I was a little high, but I was out of it. I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew I was trying to push, and she just got really close to me. She goes, Katie, on 3, you're gonna stand up and get out. 1, 2, 3, and then boosted me out. The tub drained immediately, and they walked me out, and it was so fast, and I was like, what is going on? And my husband said that his head, because, are you loving these graphics, visuals? His head was out, and the rest of him was still in, and so I got out with his head just hanging out of me, that's it. And he was like, oh my god, because I almost, like, his head almost hit the tub, but it didn't. But they were so fast. They were just like, they knew what happened, and they immediately dealt with it. In like 10 seconds, he was out. It was crazy. They were just like, okay, in 3 seconds, you're gonna get up. 1, 2, 3, boom, and, like, escorted me out of the tub, put me on the ground. They already had everything on the ground ready to deliver. They had the towels ready to go, everything. I got on all fours, and they pulled him, and they pulled him out from behind, which is another way to give birth. But so they pulled him out from behind really fast, and then did everything they needed to do. I think they kept his umbilical cord. They didn't cut his umbilical cord or anything like that. Like, they kept him attached to the placenta, but they just got him out and opened his mouth and everything. And it's crazy how fast. I couldn't believe, like, it was like kind of an emergency situation, but they were so calm, and they handled it so fast and so well. I couldn't believe it. And I also just didn't and it was cool. They like showed me the placenta. They're like, okay, and they check it for holes or anything, like they make sure everything looks good, and then they show it to you, and they're like, it's like a little science lesson. They're like, okay, this is this, this is this, and I thought that was really cool. All while it's still attached to the baby, which is nice, which is what I wanted. I wanted delayed cord clamping with my first, and we couldn't do that just because of the situation he was in. And then it says a local, so I think they gave me a little bit of a pain shot in my hoo-ha, and they did a few stitches. So I had I only had one first degree tear, so very minor, not a big deal. And she, again, like the humility, I feel like, of the midwives I had was so nice. Like, she was like, okay, you do have one tear. Do you mind if we stitch it, or would you rather let it heal naturally? I was like, you can stitch it, that's fine. Like, just a few stitches is fine. And she's like, honestly, that even wasn't even from birth. That was from me pulling him out. So, like, that was my fault. And I was like, you're literally admitting something. She's like, you pushing did not cause this. It was simply for me, like, kind of panicking and pulling him out. And it was just, like, so cool to see, like, be told everything completely honestly and, like, taking accountability, and such a good experience. So yeah, then they cut the cord, and I just hung out with him. So you do like an hour of skin to skin. So we didn't even find out like how heavy he was or anything like that until like an hour after he gave birth. This is like wild. Did you expect it to be this long? Cool. Let me see if they have any other. So when you're in a birthing center, you usually get discharged within 4 to 12 hours. They say usually they try to let you leave at like 4 hours. Well, he was born at 8:40 p.m. And so by the time they finished everything, it was midnight, and they didn't have anyone else there. And so they were like, if you want to sleep and leave in the morning, that's okay with us. And so I was really grateful. I was like, yes, please. Especially with the toddler at home. I was like, I don't want to get home at midnight with the toddler, and I don't know, so it was actually perfect, because then the next morning, so we were there through the night. I mean, look, I barely slept, obviously, but we went, so in the morning when they were discharging us, it was nice. My husband went home, took him to daycare, my first son took him to daycare, and then came home. So we got to go home with no one else at home, with like our son not home, get situated, get in bed, get everything set up, and then later towards the end of the day picked him up from daycare, and then he got to meet. It was like the perfect timing of like everyone kind of gets their own space. So that worked out really well. The discharge process, night and day, I actually feel pretty passionately about how messed up I think the hospital discharge process, at least in the US, is. I feel very passionately about how new moms are treated by the hospitals and that whole discharge process. Maybe it's different now than 5 years ago. From what I've heard, it's not, but it definitely caused me a lot of extra anxiety that I don't think was necessary. Whereas the midwives were like very supportive and just gave you a lot of information. Anyways, so the discharge process I definitely preferred at the midwife center. So I went home, and I probably had a full week of like pure bed rest, which I think was perfect. And then the practice of, actually we didn't go home. We took him to the pediatrician first for a weight check, and then we went home. So then after 2 days, they send a nurse to your home. They do a home visit. This specific birthing center, the one I'm at now, isn't going to do that, but the birthing center I was at, they sent a midwife to your house. So like she came up into the bedroom and did my exam and checked the baby in our house, which was really nice. And then I just kept going to the pediatrician for weight checks and stuff. But let's see, that was after 2 days. And then after a week, So I went back for a 2-week follow-up and a 6-week follow-up. The 6-week follow-up was obviously weird. That was in the middle of the pandemic. So basically, my son was born in February of 2020, and February 20th, 2020. And 3 weeks later, or like 3 to 4 weeks later, is whenever everything shut down. Everything shut down in my city, like March 14th or something. Or March 17th, I forget. That week. So it was like 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, everything, like my healing was super awesome. I basically was done bleeding within 2 weeks, I think. I don't remember what I said in my last video, but I was done bleeding in like 2 weeks. Everything was like good. It was just such a night and day experience, and I do think I can attribute that to it being my second child. I think your first experience might always be really scary, and I had so much more confidence going into it the second time because I felt like I at least had been through it before. I also was equipped with more information going into it the second time. So if you have any questions about midwifery, or like, I don't know, this birth story, I love to talk about it. Again, like, if you're planning hospital birth, it could very well go super smooth. I know plenty of hospital births that went perfect. I think my sister's had 4 hospital births go pretty much perfectly. Like, it's just these are my experiences, and I also think it's good for people just to know what options they have, and like, I don't know, listen to other people's experiences, because after my epidural failed with my first, then people started saying like, oh yeah, mine failed too. And I was like, why didn't you tell? I wish someone would have told me that beforehand. But alright, this may be my longest video I've ever posted, I'm not sure, but anyways, like I said, everyone's experience is different, every hospital is different, every doctor is different, but this is my experience, so, I mean, and you can't deny me my own experience. But here's just to say, like, you could have a great experience, having made, you know, such, like, different decisions for me and all that, but, alright, well, I hope you've got to be asleep by now, right? You were probably asleep until I said the word vagina, and then you're like, wait, what? So, I hope you have a relaxing night. Let me know if there's any other story times you'd want me to tell. I obviously can ramble forever, so these are a good type of video for like making long ass videos.